Hello everybody, it is John, and today we are going back into the dim, dark past. And we are looking at Dragon magazine number 43, which was published in November 1980. And the article that I'm looking at is, how do you, as in big capitals, you rate as a DM? And the subtitle is Only Your Players Know For Sure. And it is written by Deanne Iwan. Now, if I've mispronounced that surname, I do apologise profusely. But it's an interesting article in the fact that of late I have seen a lot of people starting, well, not a lot of people, some people starting to advertise their services as a dungeon master or game master for many different game systems that are floating out there. And some of the hourly rates that these people are charging are, well, not concerning. After all, it's a free market. If you do want to pay for these services and you're happy to do so, well and good. However, myself, having game mastered for over 40 years, I find that for me, that is an incredibly mercenary situation to be putting yourself into, because as this article looks at is just how good are you as a DM, and obviously trying to be able to sell your services. It could be a very short trip of as a business, because how do you define satisfaction for money spent? You could have somebody who decides to run run adventures and charge X amount of dollars, and in the end you get a Mickey Mouse adventure that's underperformed, underdeveloped, and underwhelming. Yeah, it's where do you then stand as for somebody who's trying to obviously try and make a business? Not everybody can be these extravagant people that are on YouTube that have garnered quite a following. Not everybody can fall into that category. I myself, I enjoy feedback from my players when I do run things, because ultimately, while I get satisfaction out of running an adventure, the primary people who make the whole game tick is the players. And if the players are not getting the satisfaction or enjoyment, then where does the fault lie? Is it in the players? Is it in the game master? And it's interesting that this particular article was having people navel gaze all the way back in 1980 as to just what makes a good game master. And it's an interesting concept. If you can find the article, like for instance, there's only two very small paragraph sections in the Dragon magazine that talks about this, and in most cases it's things like DMs offering certain things. In other words, things like I'll actually quote this, but it says but when the DM announces he will offer 5,000 gold pieces for a Rod of Cancellation, but wants 40,000 gold pieces for a Nox Scroll, the helpless character has nothing he can do to immediately and forcefully voice his displeasure. Well, yes, you can. As a player, you can say, look, I don't think that's a very good option. It's an issue that clearly a game master would need to balance. But in some cases, it could very well be the fact that perhaps players are using Nox spells far too readily, and that it's unbalancing the capacity to force thieves to unlock doors or things like that. It's that's one example. I know that certainly the last time I was running some D&D adventures that I think the druids, I can't remember who it was now, but somebody had come, one of the spells, I can't remember what it was, but it was an area effect spell that was just absolutely horrendous. I did not like it, and consequently had a lot of trouble trying to work out how I could reduce just how effective this spell was in regards to adventures. So it's a bit of give and take as a game master as to making adventures challenging enough without making players too unhappy. Now, one of the jobs that I had in a previous life was as a quality assurance manager and document controller, and God, what else was there? I just about did everything when it came to the quality assurance, but it was, my part of my role was always looking for feedback. And in this article, Deanne actually gives a Dungeon Master evaluation form, which is very interesting. And it has how many questions? It's always the thing when I look at quality control, is just keeping things as short and sweet as possible without too much time being spent on, I guess, minuete. Okay, I've probably butchered that. My English is devolving these days. But anyway, she has included here 43 questions, and I'll put them up on the screen that you will see. But there's things like, obviously you need to tick. It's a tick affair where you just tick on things to agree or not agree. And in some cases, I don't know, why some of the questions are here. Like it says, well, we start off with things like, I think your games are much too easy for characters. No matter how stupidly we play, we survive, advance, and gain treasure. Well, that's an interesting question, because I think that's recently come up about, there has been an argument about the death of characters, and that, you should never kill a character. Well, obviously people don't play computer games much, or do they assume because they've got a save point they can always get back to undo their untimely death? But it's interesting. So, your games are much too difficult. So, too easy, too difficult, let me know. Basically, I think hazards and rewards are fairly well balanced in your world, so yes or no? I can't quite work this one out. Haven't you ever heard of resurrection? Well, I think everyone's heard of resurrection, but does anybody ever die in this place? It feeds in nicely, doesn't it? So, and then there is this business with the frequency with which we play. I think an average of about X person or persons per campaign should die resurrectably or non-resurrectably in order to keep the game exciting. Well, that's an interesting one. It's much too easy to gain treasure in this world. Well, you might gain treasure, but being able to take treasure could be a problem. You need more treasure in your dungeons. Well, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. Your major treasures are really inventive, but you need a few more minor treasures scattered about. Interesting. I am looking at this and wondering just where this is going. I would look at most of this and go, well, I would probably redo most of these questions to be, I guess, more quantitative, perhaps. But, it goes on. More minor magical items would add a lot to your campaign. Well, I tend to find, as a game master, don't like really throwing around magic items, because they really do unbalance the game long term. So, because I guess if you look at narrative fiction that is written by past authors at that time, and that, most of the heroes don't go running around laden with the amount of equipment and magic items and such that people in role-playing games do. So, if you're looking for, dare I say, reality within a fantasy setting, is that less is better than more. But again, I could very well be in the minority, and really it's what makes the players happy and want to come back. So, some things like I like running low-level adventures because, it makes the players think a bit more and they're a little more wary about what they're doing. So they are asking... So, pardon me, questions here are being asked is, do you like low levels of 1 to 3, moderately high from 7 to 10, or 15 to 20? Now, I noticed that there was nothing here for levels 4 to 6, which is, I guess, one of the levels that I find optimum to play with. They're not really low, they're not really, heading towards high. That's just that nice sweet spot, in my opinion. Even asking here is, I like even higher levels. That's even more worrying. Particularly when you've got, particularly in AD&D in the early days, they would give stats for gods. I'm sorry, little people don't get to kill gods. It's pure fantasy. Gods are gods. They're meant to be untouchable. Best you might be able to do is trick them, but killing them? Yeah, well, I guess that's the mentality of the competitive nature of role-playing, I guess. So, what else have we got here? I prefer games with only a character per player per adventure. Well, that's pretty much been the case. It's only when we sort of drop down to low numbers of players that I would probably look at players having more than one character, but that's, sometimes. So then we've got, I prefer party-size adventures where some or all of the players have 1 or 2 companions in arms. Interesting. Again, as we start to work our way through these questions, it's sort of like, yes, you can tick it, but then what sort of quantity of a response are you looking for? In other words, this really is just pointing out that these are areas that we find may be problematic. What have we got here? Question 9. It says the whole point of these games is creativity. When I'm inventive and daring enough to pick the vampire's pocket, I expect to be rewarded if I succeed. Well, why wouldn't you? I certainly find creativity with players is exceptional. I will design adventures and I'll put in and create nice little traps or puzzles, and it never ceases to amaze me how players think out of the box, and you just have to sit there and think, well, I never thought of that, and what they've come up with is actually a bloody good way to get around it. So that creativity, look, I'd give them additional experience points for that and allow some or all success depending on how they went about doing it. So but then even so, part of 9, they said here, picking the key out of the vampire's pocket was cheating. You should have to hack your way through a monster. Well, for goodness sakes. If your group is nothing more than murder hobos, as I think they're termed now, obviously if you've got people who don't want to solve things and just want to hack and slash and kill their way through, well, yeah, but personally myself, if people can resolve adventures without having to always resort to combat, then reward them. 10, what do we got here? Best parts of your campaign are the dungeons themselves. Your rooms, traps and the likes are always a surprise, delightful and otherwise. Look, that would be wonderful if that was feedback that you got. Your non-player characters are what makes your game. We run into the most fascinating people. They bring the adventure to life. Well, I would hope that that would be the case. To get that feedback from your players with this is really the ultimate icing on the cake to make you continue to run. In other words, if people are saying, look, I really enjoyed what you did, your NPCs were excellent, what's it got here? Your inventive curses are intriguing. Interesting. Were you a gypsy in a former life? No. Gypsies are not the only people who do curses, so please bear that in mind. It's really the themes to places in your world that give the campaign body. No one will ever say you had a computer run off rooms, monsters and treasures, which is another bugbear for me now, is that this virtual tabletop and people sitting down around a table with computers in front of them or laptops and tablets. They're more focused on that than they are with actually integrating or interacting with other people around the table. So, this is, certainly as a game master, they're not the things that I look forward to. So for people to think that all you're doing is, random charts and generation, well, then that could be a problem. What have we got next? 11. It's most fun to play competent characters. I prefer the newer techniques of rolling up characteristics. I can fall over the trash can in real life. When I come to D&D, I want to track my arch enemy over rocky mountains and through marshy mires, which is quite right. You don't want to be representing your real self in a fantasy world most of the time. And that brings me also to the business with, playing characters with disabilities. I don't think... Look, to be quite honest, I have not met anybody who wants to play a disabled person in a role-playing situation, particularly when it might be the disability they have themselves. I myself, who suffers severely from mental illness, don't want to have to hash that or represent that myself in adventures, and that's not really the way to move forward with role-playing games. That's sadly for those sort of tick-the-box adventure type people that want to be seen as cool because they're doing something that is trendy and edgy, and I'm sorry, but it's not, and I find it offensive myself. Then they finally come to question 12, where they say, overall, I thought your last adventure was excellent, pretty good, better than being hung up by my toes for hours. So it's interesting that, this person has tried to write this with some humour in it. I don't know how well it is compared to today, but it's interesting. So, they're asking, what did you think? Then question 13, usually, though your games are fantastic, great fun, better than being run over, worse than being hit. Yeah, okay, we could probably have, reduced those down to a smaller, more manageable block. 14, your games give too much advantage too. And here we have a whole slew of choices where, magic users get it far too easy, or fighters, or druids, thieves, elves, clerics, illusionists, humans, dwarves, and other. Well, quite honestly, I don't see where there would be an advantage, or I would give an advantage to anybody within an adventure. I try to make my adventures as generic as possible, that no matter what the character profession is that's chosen, anybody can do it. Then what do we got here? 15. On the other hand, it's a horror to be. So in other words, you're saying, yep, in one case you give too much advantage to one, but then it's horror if I want to play another. So in other words, if you play the elf, well, sorry, not play the elf. Let's say you play the thief, and you're set in in a situation where the thief has no benefit at all. Actually, in the old days, it used to be the cleric. The cleric was only dragged around because of the battery of healing capacity that they had. So, otherwise you spent most of your time sitting on the sidelines because you were far too precious to expend in an adventure. So 16 is advancement in your dungeon is too fast, too slow, too variable. It's an interesting concept, is that just how do you advance the characters without it becoming, boring. 17, pacing an adventure is almost entirely up to you as a DM. In general, your pacing is good. Could stand up some beefing. Pacing, do you have pacing? Yeah, so that's interesting. Again, we're looking at 18. We're still looking at, obviously, what the concept of pacing, if you stopped characters from discussing their moves in melee by making that decision their move. Well, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know about that. But, I've known situations where player characters have spent almost like 10, 15 minutes or more thinking about how they're going to deal with a particular situation. And in most cases, they tend to be, melee combat orientated. So, it's an interesting thing. They talk here about letting one of the characters boss the others so much. Didn't let one of the characters boss you so much. You didn't take half of forever to look something up in the manual all the time. It's these are all things that sometimes happen with a game master. I know myself that I am not a repository of all knowledge with regards to a game. I look at the bare bones, and quite frankly, if people say, "Oh, you should know precisely how long," God, I'm trying to think of a spell now. I don't know, sleep. You should know exactly how long sleep should go for. And I'm thinking, well, no, I don't. I never will. And when I need to, I'll already, if a sleep spell is already in what my adventure is going to have, then it'll be in there so that I know what it is. And the player characters, if they have sleep as a spell, they'll know exactly what to tell me how long things should be running for. So I think for a game master to be ultimately the repository of every ounce of knowledge within a role-playing game, I think is a bad way to be looking at that, because it's more for me the narrative journey than it is for the read as written style mentality that a lot of people seem to enjoy. But anyway, on those occasions, question 19, when you don't quite remember what the manual says on a certain point, I would prefer that you look up the answer. Well, would they? Yeah, I suppose so. It depends how long it takes me to find it. As I've said previously, I don't know sometimes exactly where things are within the rule book. The rule books themselves are sadly difficult to find sometimes, and it'll be found under an obscure little, particularly for the rules lawyers, they'll go, but if you remember that after or in section 24 part 5 of this particular paragraph, you'll find that it actually contradicts what's written in the rules, and therefore this overrides the previous situation. And you're there going, oh God, where do I stand? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Consistency, 21, consistency or inconsistency with itself, with D&D, as I said, it's a difficult way. Your campaign, 22, could use more or less. So they've got all sorts of things here, like chaotic creatures, dead characters. Well, I don't think characters today want to die. Ways to get information. It lists a whole heap of things here. 23, there is too much magic in the campaign. Well, depends how the campaign's run. Is there? Is there an ideal ratio of levels progressed through to games played? That's question 24. 25. You have too few curses in your games. Well, yeah, who knows? Who knows what the definitive of too many and too few are. I must admit that I don't tend to use curses myself a lot, because in most cases they tend to be fairly useless, as most characters will have a way of getting around them far too easily. Next one's traps. Too many, too few, mystifying, delightful. I tend to find that, particularly with puzzles, most people don't want to do puzzles anymore. Nobody wants to think, which is a sad way that, it is. So you have too many, too few characters in the games. Yeah, boring, cannon fodder. Well, there's always cannon fodder in every adventure. 28. I prefer that non-player characters have strong personalities and can be persuaded into being true sidekick companions. Well, yes and no. The last thing you want is, for a first level character to go, oh, look, there's a level 30 character. I'll get him to be my sidekick. No, not going to happen. It's one of those things. I just want to hire me some cannon fodder. Well, I guess the cannon fodder, you may only do it one or two times before suddenly I myself as a game master would be saying, well, look, there's, the hiring, the mercenary guilds have seen that your casualty rate for adventurers is 100%. Nobody wants to take a job on with you. They're the funny things, isn't it? 29, you do not let a bossy player get away with running everybody's life. Look, honestly, in every game that I have run role-playing, there is always, shall I call it, the alpha player. The person who takes on more or less that leader role, who sort of does the main suggesting. And if they're a sensible person, they will listen to what the rest of the party does. But generally, you'll find there'll be somebody who's always wanting to, set the pace and say, this is what we should do. And then, sadly, you've also got those people who just, are just there. They don't, trying to get them motivated into taking actions and being assertive sometimes is difficult. And it's one of those roles as a game master you need to keep an eye on, particularly, the ones that are very quiet. You need to sort of go, well, what do you think? What would your character like to do? And things like that. So it's interesting they got here, in question 29 is devise a method of choosing a leader, such as making the character with the highest charisma plus level lead. Well, I don't think that's always the case, because sometimes this is obviously looking purely from a game perspective as to who the leader would be. But that does not necessarily mean that has to be the case within the players themselves. What do we got here? 30. Worlds where the DM borrows heavily on mythologies, literary fantasies, etc., which interest him. Whether or not these are in the AD&D manuals are most interesting worlds. And it's, they're saying here, please stick to the manuals. I don't play often enough to figure out all your quirks. But honestly, that's the whole purpose of running an adventure, is that unknown quantity. Because I find that with people with mobile phones today is that you'll be running an adventure and you'll say, okay, you have a flesh golem has approached the party. And they're at their phones, they're flicking through trying to find the stats and everything for a flesh monster, for a flesh golem, and then they're looking at what they can do, rather than this whole business of, look, I really have no idea how I'm going to fight this creature or interact with it. Don't always have to fight them if you interact with them. So what in heaven's name do you it's strange. It really is. So I don't stick to the manuals. If there's any monsters that I use out of the books, I change them. I change their attributes. I change what they can do, what they're immune to, what they're susceptible to being gain additional damage or such. It's make it as exciting and different as possible. So they're saying here, 31, DMs who guide us through an adventure are best. Well, isn't that what we all try to do as game masters? I prefer lots of opportunity to choose my own path in the world, but does this require lots of chances to find out information? Blind stumbling around is boring. Well, that's quite right, which is why, as a game master, if you are running an adventure that has a sense of logic and a reason behind it, people will become far more interested in playing the adventure than they are with just a one-off. Campaigns are always better than, in my opinion, than one-off. But that's me. You need more or less everyday objects in your campaign. Yep, quite right. There's lots of things that will do well, particularly if you have an adventure where you need certain things. And I think under the fifth ed, I think somebody had a sewing kit or something, which is what they needed to sew up a mysterious bag that helped them in the adventure. So, mundane items, keep them everywhere. Mundane items have always got a use within the game. I don't like to be knifed in the back. Well, nobody likes to be knifed in the back, and you shouldn't invite unruly and unreliable characters to our game anymore. That is an incredibly difficult one to manage. And certainly it would more or less be a group decision as to whether or not a person is invited back to continue games if their behaviour is anti, I guess, fair play. If all you're going to do is undermine missions and be an absolute chaotic evil, dare I say, or chaotic neutral sort of individual, then, as a game master, I would find that incredibly frustrating, and certainly the players would, I don't think, enjoy gaming with somebody who does nothing but sabotage and destroy adventures. So, obviously, it's an interesting question that's in there is about what a game master would do as to, Best part of your game is, there we go, break for pizza. Yes, everybody loves lunchtime. The incredible detail of your world, the concrete rewards for money, for effort. So it's interesting. There's so many things here that are things that you want to hear back as a game master to say that, look, and this I think was covered in a previous question. So this is a bit repetitive in some cases. Question 35, my favourite role-playing game is one close to medieval tales, heroic fantasy, one with a heavy scientific bent, one with mutants, one with space travel or other. Yeah, it's obviously if you're playing a Dungeons and Dragons style game, it tends to be more the medieval heroic fantasy style games. So you're sort of entering into other areas. And I'm thinking of things like Spelljammer, the sort of science fiction-y aspect that was in there. And I don't know. You really do need to separate things. Well, and then that actually leads on to question 36. My favourite game, irrespective of DMs, is, D&D, AD&D, Traveller, RuneQuest, Metamorphosis, Alpha, or others. Remember, this is 1980. So we don't quite have the plethora of role-playing games as we do today. However, we did have quite a few. The gods should be offended when a player, does what? Gods can get offended over anything. Yes, it's an interesting and strange question. If I were to make one single suggestion about how to improve your campaign, it would be X. Well, as a game master, that's what you're looking for from players, is to say, look, what went right? Were you happy with what I did? Do I need to make a few, improvements? What do you think would be good to add? And then it's up to you as to whether or not you do or don't add it, and see how the players go. What have we got? 39. I don't think you give enough credit to lawful integrity, chaotic audacity, bravery, brute force, persistence, and other. So that's looking at the alignment balance, which I confess I really don't like alignment in AD&D because I tend to find that so many people can't play alignments properly. I preferred the original, which was law, chaos, and neutral, because that gave a lot more, I guess, balance or capacity for players to do things. But again, it's really down to the individual as to how they're going to do things. 40 miniatures. Oh, elaborate miniatures. Yes, well, miniatures seems to be about just about everything now. Back in 1980, not a lot of us had access to miniatures. So in my time, back in the early 80s, everything was theatre of the mind, where you would describe the situation and, there'd be a map. One of the party members would be a map maker. They'd be drawing the dungeon or the adventure or the wilderness or whatever they're going through themselves. And that was part of, the game then. Town adventurers, 41, are the most colourful parts of a game. Yes, they can be. Sometimes they're difficult. I can remember anecdotally that there was one of the game masters that used to be at Queensland Role Players, as it was known back in those days, who had designed a town, and the party members in his group refused to go to it. So we had this delightful little story of the town that would follow the adventurers around, because he was not going to waste his designed production and never have it visited. So, but that just shows, sadly, the pig-headedness of characters who refuse to sort of go in the direction that they're indicated. It's like, oh, well, look, all the clues lead to this place. We're going in the opposite direction. Well, that's not really the way that you play, and that's just silliness at the best of times. What do we got here? 42. Time in your dungeon is not realistic, and your distortions make the game more or less playable, or more or less playable. So yeah, time is an issue, and it always has been, because you're trying to tick off, and then it becomes too much of a number crunch in my account. So, it's interesting. It says here, not even Conan could polish off 3 vampires, a dragon, and 42 orcs while travelling 100 miles in a single morning. Don't know. Conan did have prestigious constitution. I have no idea as to whether or not he could or not. We'd have to ask old his creator, Robert E. Howard. Is that right? Oh, God, I can't even remember now. Look, I'm having a brain freeze now. We'd have to ask the author as to whether or not Conan could do that. He probably could. And then in the end here, it says, question number 43, the last one is, I like to hack and slash. I like dungeons that take many adventures. I like mini campaigns that take 1 or 2 adventures to complete. So that, again, is a balance. I myself always run things as a campaign, where people can come in and out. I've had situations where I've had 2 groups of players operating in, for instance, Saltmarsh, and each of the groups was keen to be able to interact with the other one, and I was very close to being able to do that, but the club that I was at sadly shut down, and I was not able to do that as a one-day one-off for my group, or groups I should say. But look, that's an interesting, I guess I've waffled, and just looking at the things that it's just so interesting to see, how do you evaluate yourself as a dungeon master? And really it comes down to, at the end of every adventure, go, well, look, what worked well? What didn't work well? What would you like to see improved for the next time? And that is really the main questions you should be asking your players if you're looking to see yourself as a successful dungeon master is that people get fun and enjoyment and that they want to come back next time. So I think I've waffled on more than enough at the moment. So what are your thoughts? How would you get your players to evaluate yourself as a dungeon master, game master, or something like that? So anyway, thank you everybody. Till next time, signing off, the Honourable John.